Hello, my lace-loving friends. I'm Romy Hill, as you probably know, but maybe you don't. And I am here to talk about Floriade, which is the first of the Lace Lovers Club of 2023. And I just want to warn you, as I usually do on these lives, that there is some delay. So I'm talking and you won't get it for a few seconds. And so when you ask me a question or say hello or something in the comments, I will definitely see it, but it may take a little bit for me to see it and get back and answer it. So please do feel free, completely free to ask questions. I love questions, and let me know if there's anything that I can cover for you. I have really been enjoying watching your progress in the Ravelry group, and there's some really gorgeous ones out there. I know some of you, it took a little bit of getting used to for the two-sided lace, but wow, your projects are looking so beautiful. So well done. They look really nice. So today I am going to go over the the non two-sided lace parts, which is most of the shawl. So there's the inner triangle, and last time we did the inner triangle and picked up stitches around the outside. And so this time I'm just going to kind of take a look through the rest of the charts. I'm going to talk about bead placement and how to place the beads. And I have both my crochet hook with me and also my super floss. And I know that those of you who purchase club kits got some super floss too. So in case you've been wondering what on earth all that is about, I will show you. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the knitted on edging and also how to block a lace shawl optimally. So, hi, I see at least Sue is here, and I think Christina might be here too. It's nice to see you. So let's get started on the shawl. So again, here's the shawl. So this top part up in this area, that is what we talked about before. And now we are going to be talking about the bottom area, that this area here with the beads, and then the knitted on lace edging down at the bottom. Alrighty, so let me switch over here. Okay, so here we are. Last time we went through the transition, and so now I'm going to kind of start with chart D and then work down through the edging. And let's take a look over here. So don't forget to work the transition between charts C and D. This top part is going to be bound off across the top. So just going to show you up here. So you're going to be binding off in case you did not watch the first one of these. So this part across here, I show you how to do that. And then we have picked up all the way around the inner triangle. So cast on here, worked all the way up to the top here, and then bound off right across in between my fingers here. And now we're going to work back and forth for a while. And after that, there's going to be a knitted on edging. Okay. So this is the first chart that you're going to be looking at before you do the knitted on edging. So this is right after you've done the transition part. And you can see the transition over on this first page here where it's, sorry, this top one here, where it says transition, you're going to be working all of that first before you work chart D. So that's a really important part. Okay, so let's get over to chart D. So this is a little bit different for the medium and the tall sizes. So the medium size is going to be right here, so that it's 18 repeats of this little repeat area here. And then the tall size, this chart is worked 2 times. So your repeat numbers are 24 and 28. So this chart, in order to make it stack up properly and not be a tiny, tiny little chart that it's impossible to see, I worked 2 repeats into this area here. So these 2 sides here are incorporated into this repeat, and it jumps from 18 repeats of this area down here to 20 repeats of the area up here. So, and that's the same for the tall. It goes from 24 to 26, and then for the second time through from 28 to 30. So this chart D shows only right side rows. So all of these are going to be worked from right to left, and then the wrong side row is going to be the same on each one of these, and it's just going to be a knit 1 through the back loop 2 times, purl to 2 stitches before the end, and then knit 1 through the back loop 2 times. And that's going to be for every single wrong side row. So on some of these rows, you are going to be placing beads. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the method here, but I do first want to say this is where you'll be placing the beads. If you want to have a complete resting row on the wrong side, you can actually do this stitch as shown, the SK2P, and then place a bead after you have done the stitch. And then on the wrong side row, all you have to do is purl through. So if you do want to place them on the wrong side row, that is, you're going to place the bead before you purl. And I will show you what that looks like. Okay, so all of these marked places here, those are all bead placements. And I'm just going to pull my shawl over here and show you what that looks like. So this is what it looks like. You're just placing these beads, and it's fairly obvious where they go because the motif here comes to a point. So you can see the SK2P right here underneath where that bead is placed. So that motif needs to come to a point. So if you're wondering exactly where you want to place the bead, definitely take a look at your knitting, and your knitting will tell you everything you need to know, that bead needs to go right on top of the point. So whichever right or wrong side you want to place it on, just remember to place it at the top of the point. And then you can see down here as well, this is the next chart. Okay, so that is chart D. And let's take a look at chart E. Chart E continues on. It's worked only 1 time for both the medium and the tall sizes. So I just want to call your attention to this little stitch right here. That's a knit 1 through the back loop only right beside this spine. So it's not going to hurt your fabric at all if you do have a knit through the back loop somewhere else, or like if you forget and you do all the repeats like that, it's not worth ripping it out because probably no one will notice. But this is meant only to be right next to the spine, and that is just to make the yarn over right below this kind of crisper and more neat and tidy. So the rest of these are just going to be knit that one right there, that is the only one that's going to be worked through the back loop. And so again, up here we have the same thing. This is only right side rows. So on this, you're going to be working from the right to the left on every single one. And just like chart D, the wrong side rows are knit 2 through the back loop, and then you're going to purl across to the last 2 stitches and knit 2 through the back loop. So again, on this chart, you can see these little SK2Ps are in color, and that means you're going to place a bead there. So the way this is written with the chart symbols and everything, it's meant to be placed on the wrong side. But again, if you would like that wrong side just to be a resting row, you can place them on the right side after you have done the SK2P. Okay, so after that, we have a little bit of a transition. So here's the chart E. Once you have finished chart E, don't forget we have just a little bit of transition here. So this transition is so that in the middle, so let me get the point here so you can see what this looks like. So when you're doing a knitted on edging, you're knitting at a 90-degree angle to all of your body stitches. So I like to leave a little bit of extra leeway around the bottom here, around the point. So in order to do that, I have just added in some extra stitches right around the center, and then I've added some extra stitches at the side so that your knitted on edging can ease better around the bend here. So this little bit right up here is going to be right in the center. And when you block it out, you'll see that it eases around and it's not going to pull, and you'll still get that really pretty pattern around here without any lumps or pulling right around this corner here in the center. So that is what the transition is for. So for the transition, it's just going to be adding some extra stitches. So you can see we're knitting to the marker and just adding some extra in the center. And then on row 2, some more. So row 2 is not just a plain purl row. It does add extra stitches on the ends and in the center so that the repeat works out and so that you're able to have some extra fabric at the ends and in the center. So let's take a little bit of look over here. So one of the things about a knitted on edging is that sometimes it can look a little stair-steppy. So kind of like this, like there's a corner there when you start doing the edging. So I like to give just a little extra in this area here. So there's some extra stitches right through here, and they're going to help you pull this out into a triangle shape when you're blocking it. So it gives you a more of a straight line than you would get otherwise if there weren't those little extra stitches in there. Okay, so at this point, before you start your knitted on edging, this is a good time to weigh your yarn. So I am an inveterate yarn weigher, and I like to kind of keep track of how much yarn I have used and make sure that I'm not going to run out. And the really cool thing about a knitted on edging like this is that it's super simple to figure out if you're going to run out of yarn. And it's always going to look, when you start one of these, it will always look like you have tons and tons of yarn left. So it can be really challenging and sort of confusing to see how much yarn it seems you have left and then run out of it maybe 3/4 of the way through. So I always do a repeat of this edging and then weigh my yarn again. So I've weighed it before going into this area and then I weigh it afterwards and I'll figure out if I'm going to have enough yarn to go all the way around. So I had yarn left over after I did the edging, and so I had uh, at least 10% of my yarn left. So you shouldn't have a problem. But this is a great way to sort of make your fears just kind of disappear so you can enjoy the knitted on edging. And there are beads placed in the knitted on edging as well. So this chart right here shows a what you see is what you knit format. So that means that as you're looking at this, this is stockinette over on this side here where you can see the pearls, and over here, this is actually garter, where that is knit stitch on the back side. There is also an alternate chart for this. So, and this is a more widely used charting. So this shows you what you're going to see from the front side. This is a stockinette background here, and over on this side, this is a garter background. So you can use whichever of those you would prefer to use. So whichever one of those is easier for you. And then there are also the written instructions down at the bottom. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at placing some beads, and then also I'm going to show you how to do this knitted on edging here. So on the transition here, it's going to show you how many stitches that you need to cast on as well. So I am using a smaller double pointed needle than, and this is just my swatch, has nothing to do with the actual material you're going to end up with. Okay, so I'm going to use a smaller double pointed needle, just one smaller than my working needle. And that helps with two things. One, it actually helps you with your yarn usage. So it cuts down just a little bit of yarn usage, but also it keeps your edging looking just a little bit neater. So for those of you who have never done a knitted on edging, this may seem like a very strange thing that we're doing here. So it says with right side facing, cast on 23 stitches to left needle using smaller double pointed needle. So I am not going to cast on the 23. I'm just going to show you how this goes onto your body stitches. So these would be the body of the shawl here, and this is the beginning of the bind off. So I'm just going to cast on 10 stitches, and I'm going to use my knitted on, my knitted cast on. So it's literally just knitting into that stitch, and then you're going to twist it to put it onto your needle so that the right leg of your stitch is in front and the left leg is in back. And you can just keep your needle in there and cast those on. Okay, so I'm just going to do plain garter stitch and show you how this, well, maybe I'll do 2 stitches of garter stitch on the outside and show you what it looks like when you're attaching it. So this here is equivalent to that last edging chart, although I am not following the chart. I'm just showing you how this is set up, so how it comes together. So each time I go through here, I'm just going to work all the way to the end here. And now I'm going to, for the last two stitches, one of them is going to be from this edging here, and the other is going to be a body stitch. I'm going to knit those two together through the back loop. So after that is done, one stitch has been bound off. And now I'm going to turn it over. And this first stitch here always gets slipped. So you want to slip it with the yarn in front and slip it purlwise. And that's going to create a nice kind of chain along the side of your shawl. And I will show you that in just a minute. And then you're just going to work back out to the end here. So that was one stitch bound off. So for each 2 rows of the edging chart, you will have bound off one stitch of the body. And so it's actually, this is how it's associated. So this is worked at a 90-degree angle to the body stitches. Okay, so let me show you what that chain looks like along the side. So you can see down here, here's the chain that you create going along the edge of those body stitches. So right down here, that's the body of my shawl. And then you can see that chain that separates the body from the edging up here, which is knit back and forth. And in the chart, there are decreases and increases that create the scallops and the triangles here. Okay, so, and this just goes on, and as you're doing this, you're going to be using your small DPN along with just your working needle. So as you're going towards the body stitches, you'll be using the DPN. So here I am back to the edge. Here's my last stitch. And that's going to be knit together through the back loop with the next body stitch. So you can see it started to create a chain along the side. And then slip with the yarn in front. So when you slip with the yarn in front, you are leaving that chain so it as a decorative piece. So you don't want to slip with yarn in back because that will cover up the chain. Okay, so you can see a little bit better now how that's going. You can see up here, the stitches are going at perpendicular to the body stitches. And that is how your whole edging is going to be. Okay, so I am going to back this out and show you some bead placing. Okay. So we have two possibilities here. I generally place my beads with a crochet hook. However, there are issues with that. So it has to be, first of all, has to be a really tiny crochet hook. Like this one is very small. It's a steel hook. I inherited all of my mother's and grandmother's steel crochet hooks. So I have tiny, tiny crochet hooks coming out my ears. And one thing I want to say about steel hooks is that they split the yarn pretty easily. So that can be an issue. The other thing is that you never know exactly how big the hook is going to be. So It's actually the shaft. When you see the size of the crochet hook mentioned, they're talking about the shaft and not the hook. So for instance, if I have a size 14 steel hook and my hook fits through beads, yours might not. It might be a different brand, and the hook might not fit through your beads. So it's best, if at all possible, if you can actually see the hook and try it before you assume that it's going to work with your beads. So this one definitely does work, but it's a very old hook. Um, this is what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to stick it all the way through your bead. Okay, so let's do this first. Okay, just going to go along here. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how you would handle an SK2P if you want to place a bead on the front side instead of the back side. So in case you want your pearl resting row just to be a complete and total resting row, this is how you would handle that. So if I come to the SK2P on my chart, I'm going to do the SK2P, and there's my stitch done. And I'm just going to stick it back. There's no reason really to stick it back, except for me, it's easier for me to do it this way, just because I'm right-handed. So I use my right hand to place the beads. So I am just going to, I hooked the bead through there, and now I am going to hook my stitch and pull my stitch through the bead. So then my stitch comes off the needle and then goes back onto the needle. And now I'm just going to slip that back over to my right needle. And now when I come to that on the wrong side, I can just purl right on by it. Okay, so now what if I want to do it the other way, the way it's written? Here's an SK2P, and I will place the bead on the wrong side. I'm just going to turn around in the middle of the row here and pretend I'm purling back the other way. And I come to my SK2P. Yours will have yarn overs around it, so it will be way more obvious than this. So now I'm just going to grab my bead just the same as before. And this is before I have knit that stitch. I'm going to grab that little stitch, push the bead over my stitch, pull the stitch off the needle, and replace it onto my left needle. And now I'm going to purl the stitch. So on the wrong side, I have worked my stitch after I place the bead, and I've just come here to the bead that I placed on the right side. And now I'm going to purl that. And we can take a look at the front. You'll see that it is, you can't tell the difference. They are identical. So they look the same. They're basically placed exactly the same. They both are at the top of this SK2P. And either method is fine. So it's totally your choice, whichever lays more comfortably for you. Okay, so what if you don't want to use the crochet hook, if you want to use super floss? Super floss is a very cool thing. It has a hard end, so it's for people who wear braces. It has a hard end that's it's very stiff. And then it has a fluffy bit right here. And the end of it is a piece of dental floss. So just like your normal everyday dental floss. So I love traveling with my super floss. And this is what I do when I want to travel with my beads. I tie one bead at the end of the dental floss. This is not the stiff end, it's the dental floss end. And then I just string all of my beads onto the super floss. And whenever I want to place a bead, all I have to do is move one up onto the fluffy spot up here, kind of the staging area. And then I'm going to use this stiff end here to place the bead. So let me show you how that goes. Okay, so I'm going to do it again on the right side. So here is an SK2P. So since this is the right side, I want to place it right after I work my stitch. So I'm going to do just what I was doing before. And now I'm going to take my super floss. I have to grab my bead, is trying to get away from me here. So here is my bead, and this is the stiff end. So I'm going to take the stiff end and put it right through my stitch here and bend it over on itself. And now I'm going to take my bead here and bring it up over both of the bits of super floss. So here's the end and here's the rest of it. And now I'm going to pull my stitch off of my needle and push my bead down over that stitch. So now I'm good to go, and I can put my stitch onto my right needle, and I can work that stitch on the wrong side is just going to be a purl. So Sue asked, does it make a difference which side you do the placement on? It does not make any difference at all. So in this particular case, because your bead is um, right over both legs of the stitch, it sits in between. So you'll be able to see your bead on both sides. So here's the back, you can see that bead, and the front, you can also see the bead. So it doesn't matter, it's totally up to you. Some of my beads on my shawl, I placed on the wrong side and some on the right side. So I got distracted while I was doing my edging too many times. So as I was going across here, all of these beads that are on the edging are placed on the right side. So after I like spaced out and made one too many mistakes, I started working this middle stitch here and then placing the bead, and on the wrong side, then I didn't have to worry about remembering my bead. So, and that looks just the same. So here it is. These are all placed on the wrong side as I was working, and on here, they're all placed on the right side. So totally up to you, whichever feels more comfortable. And you can take a look at the back. So you can see here, you can see the beads on the back because they're over both legs of the stitch. And here are the other ones on the back. So they'll always pop out. You'll always be able to see them. Okay, and let's do one more little one here. I am just going to do an SK2P on the right side and turn it over and place the bead on the wrong side. So this time I added yarn overs. It makes it a lot more obvious where you have to place the bead. So again, here is where you want to be placing that bead. I'm going to grab my super floss and push this bead up. And now I'm going to take my stitch here. This is the next stitch that I'd be working. And my super floss goes right through that stitch and bends over, doubles back on itself and through the bead. So both ends of super floss are coming out of that bead. And now I'm going to pull my stitch off my needle. And the bead goes down over both legs and the stitch gets put right back up onto my left needle. And now I'm going to purl that. And it looks like I split my yarn a little bit, so I'm going to fix that when I put it back on my needle. So let's see if I can fix that a little bit. Okay. And now I'm just going to purl that stitch and go back on by. And we're going to come by the bead that I placed on the right side, and that is just going to be worked as a purl. So nothing different there. And these two beads are going to look the same. So here's the first one. That one was placed on the right side, and this one was placed on the wrong side. And they both pop out to the right side. So whichever side is your knit side is going to have a little bit more of you're going to see more bead on the knit side. So you can still see them on the purl side. They're just not as obvious. They're going to pop a lot to the front side. Let's see. Okay. Yes, and Sue, you were saying if they were strung and only on one leg, it does make a big difference if they're pre-strung, if a bead is pre-strung, it makes a huge difference. So then which then it's not the same. So if you place on one side versus the other side, it will make a big difference. And you can't just go back and forth like this. But because this is going over both legs, they're just going to stay where you put them, like nice, well-behaved beads. So no worries about that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about blocking. So when I block my shawl, I stretch very hard. So the first thing you want to do, I know this looks really delicate, but believe it or not, when this material is wet, it's much stronger than it is when it's dry. So the first thing you want to do is to thoroughly wash this. I use a wool wash, and whichever your favorite wool wash is totally fine. Um, just make sure that you rinse it all off because sometimes it can oxidize a little bit if you don't get all of it off. And I've had some colors change a little bit, and I was able to wash it out, but now I'm like super extra careful whenever I block to make sure that all of my wool wash is completely rinsed out. So don't over agitate it. Remember, warm, soapy water is how you felt things. So don't over agitate. Cool or cold water wash is the best for any type of blocking and washing. So you want to make sure that you have thoroughly soaked any spinning oils or anything out of it. There probably aren't many because this has already been hand dyed by somebody. So they have mostly washed out the oils and in order to make sure that the color comes comes through. So once that's done, it's totally fine to kind of squish it and wring it out a little bit. Just don't rub it together. And then I like to wrap mine in a towel and just walk on it to get the excess water out. So once that's done, this is the fun part about this type of construction. This right up at the top here is a tube. So I like to take a blocking wire and I weave my blocking wire. I put it through the inside of my tube. So I'm just going to show you here, even though this one has been blocked before, this can go straight through the center of that tube. So you can see it's going through the center of the tube. And this is kind of a wide shawl, so as I was blocking it, um, like it, the one, the blocking wire I'm using right now is cut down, so I can actually have it underneath the camera. But my other ones are twice this long, but it still took me two blocking wires across the top to get all the way through the tube and down on the edges. And that is not a problem. Just when you pin it out, make sure that you put a couple of extra pins right at the junction here so it stays nice and straight. So that is what you're going to do across with the tube there. And then for the rest of it, you're just going to weave in and out. So remember when you're blocking, if you're weaving in and out here, um, every time you make a point, you are going to see that point blocked out. So in other words, if I just use pins and I put a few pins along here and my material is kind of coming up in a point like this along as I'm blocking, that point is going to stay there. So you want to do as much as you can to make this nice and straight across here. So there are other blockers. They look like little combs. You can use those. You can use tons and tons of T-pins. I really love my blocking rods. I think they're incredibly helpful and handy. And these particular ones that I have had for, I think, about 20 years now. They are TIG welding rod, and I got them from the local Ace hardware store. So they're just pure stainless steel welding rod and they have lasted really well. And they haven't tarnished or rusted or anything like that. And I love them lots. So, highly recommend. You can also find them online, like at Amazon or something like that. And I believe that these are about a 14 gauge. So, not too thick, not too thin. So this is what your top part is going to look like until you get to that tube. And then you're just going to start putting your blocking line right through the tube. But you want to make sure as you're weaving that you have it fairly close together so that when you pin it out, you're not going to make little points that you don't want there. Okay, so that is the top part. I generally do the top part first, and I don't really pin anything out until I have all of my blocking wires threaded through everything. So for the edge, another reason I really love these kind of scallopy edges is it's so much easier to block them. So they're really ornamental, but also I all I do is I just weave my blocking wire through the points here all the way across, like on both sides. So I'm going to have blocking wires just woven through all of the points and a blocking wire right up across the top here. And when I pin out, I use T-pins to pin. Let me grab my blocking mat here. So I'm just going to use a T-pin. So I love these little square tiles because I can center my shawl in the middle of the square tiles, and without measuring it, I can go look at it as kind of a grid system. And I start in the middle, pinning out, and then I stretch out from the middle. So you're going to be pinning out from the middle and just pinning your blocking line like this. If you don't like the way it looks at the point here, once these are pinned out, you can also just put a pin at each point and take the blocking wire out if you would like that, if you prefer that. So depending on the point, I sometimes do that. And that's going to make your point flatter. So now that I have done this, I can take these other pins out from in between and then just take my blocking wire out. And you want to make sure that you have adjusted everything for size before you do this, because you don't want to be going back and forth, like adjusting all of the angles and the size and all of that. So another really great thing about the blocking wires is just that you can adjust everything, and it takes much, much less time to pin and repin blocking wires than it does to pin and repin each of the points. So when you are blocking, don't be afraid to stretch it really hard. Again, the knitted material gets stronger when it's wet, so you can actually stretch really, really hard. Um, One of my former test knitters actually used to put weights on the side of her blocking mats because she stretches it so hard whenever she blocks lace. So don't feel bad about it. Don't worry about it. It's actually, it looks really delicate, but it's actually really strong. So, okay. So I think I have covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any questions or anything? And actually, this is not the last time that you can ask. Oh, and the other thing, in some climates, it will help your shawl to keep some to keep the block if you put a little bit of cornstarch in the water, in a spray bottle, and then just spray it. But I don't recommend it for every climate because in some climates you have bug problems. So for my climate in the high desert, that it works pretty well. For other climates, you could put a little tiny, tiny bit of commercial starch into a spray bottle and just spray down your shawl after you have it all pinned out, and then let it totally and completely dry. And so just a tiny, tiny bit of commercial starch. So I'm not talking about um, any crispy, crunchy. So let me see. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there are no more questions. Anyway, you don't want a crunchy shawl, but a little, just a dab of starch is going to help your shawl keep its block. So, but be careful. Cornstarch would work for me and maybe not for you, depending on climate. I would not use it in the South. or in like another more humid climate where you have issues with more insect life. So anyway, if there's anything else that you'd like to know, I am so happy to answer questions and yay, I'm glad you learned things far. And if you have any questions, just let me know and I can go over more stuff. I'm at this time I'm not planning on doing a third live for this particular shawl, but if you have any questions or there's more stuff you want to go over, I can definitely do another one or just make little tutorials for anything that you're having issues with. So let me know, and I would be happy to do that. And don't forget, we also we have that Ravelry group, and you know, go ahead and ask questions there, post your progress. Let me know how you're doing. And so nice to have you loving lace as much as I do. I, that's like totally makes my day, my month, and my year. So thank you so much for joining me. And I hope to see you pretty soon. And if you're also knitting my, if you're knitting my mystery, you'll definitely see me really soon. So take care, everybody. Have a fantastic day and keep knitting. Have fun. Bye bye.